Now, you're going to read articles in papers and magazines and wonder if it's relevant or useful to your practice. The answer is often subconsciously no. This is usually due to a lack of desire to change or improve practice. Evidence-based dentistry in medicine was originally designed to allow clinicians to figure out how to interpret research and incorporate the findings into their decision-making process. This has, over time, evolved into using the best available evidence to guide one's practice, with the issue arising when the clinician's experience and the patient values conflict with the evidence base. I'd like to encourage you to start becoming self-aware into your clinical bias and how you see the dental world, which sometimes is called ontology, and then look at how you interpret information, sometimes called epistemology. Now ask yourself where you sit across these four categories. Firstly, positivism. This means we believe in a reality that is observable. Anything else doesn't matter. It only concerns discoverable realities. Post-positivism. This is a more developed version of the previous one. We believe in a reality that is probabilistic. Where we cannot observe something, we have to draw conclusions by other means. We can get close to discovering something, but never 100%. We can use the process of falsification to help get closer to the truth. Most clinically trained people will use this approach. Our third approach is constructivism. We believe in a reality that is a sum of each individual's personally constructed reality. It can be useful in qualitative research, for example. Finally, relativism. This means we believe in a reality that is unique to each person. The reality is as you believe it and as you live it. Whilst this could be playing out in wider society, medicine and dentistry does not accept this approach. The question, why do patients hate going to the dentist? For a positivist, this is unanswerable. The constructivists will reflect on their own fears of the dentist, then interview or conduct focus groups, or even observe patients in the chair, then interpret and analyze the findings without attempting to be objective. Subjectivity is accepted in constructivism. Now, most studies have post-positivism at its heart. We believe in the reality that is based on probability. We can't be entirely sure of things, so we use significance values to check how likely we are to be correct. We start with a hypothesis. We test it and compare the results to what is most probable and against the chance of it being due to serendipity. Sometimes this is called a p-value. We also have the notion of falsification. We can't prove something to be true, only show to a high degree of probability that we have evidence to be true. How we can, however, prove something to be not true. Now let's look a bit deeper into the methods of reasoning. How we gather and interpret knowledge, as I said, sometimes called epistemology, we can rely on different philosophies. There are 5 broad approaches here. Firstly, one could take a religious approach and say, it's God's will, so it is that way. As you can imagine, very few academic institutions will use this, if any. Instead, they will opt for something like rationalism, which means we can reason our way to the truth. This is how I think something works. This new thing looks like what we previously see, therefore they must work like this as well. An alternative approach to this is take it from our traditions and say, this is how it's always been, therefore we follow that approach, called traditionalism. Fourthly, we have idealism, sometimes called innatism. This is using our intuition because we believe we're born into a built-in sense of reality. I feel this might be right. Or we can say that knowledge comes from a sensory experience. For example, I see A behaving in this way, therefore this is how it works. This is called empiricism and is most commonly used in medicine and dentistry. We also use an element of rationalism to a degree, but both have foundations in inductive and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is using observable and detectable evidence to draw a conclusion. Evidence-based dentistry relies on this, and in experimental trials we're looking at outcomes and inducing conclusions based on that. Falsifiability lets us prove something to be true to a degree of certainty, but not absolute certainty. A hypothetical example could be comparing the results of different margin designs on bacterial adherence. Checking the level of plaque attraction at a defined point across several patients could be evidence-based practice for determining the stability of margin designs. We look at the outcomes and induce a conclusion. However, if we get to that conclusion by application of theory alone, this would be deduction. Deduction assumes certain truths and extrapolates this to the present question. In our example, we could accept that vertical margins are geometrically closer fitting than horizontal, and therefore will have less cement exposure and less bacterial adherence. This is deduction, and we're assuming that the previous theory is true, which is problematic when we believe in an empirical view of the world. We need to be observing it to make it a conclusion. There is one more approach you might not have heard of, but we use it every day. That is abductive inference. We often use the best possible explanation for a given conclusion. An example is a detective drawing the most plausible conclusions from pieces of evidence from a crime scene. It's still a probabilistic assessment, but it doesn't rely on pre-existing theory, in the case of deduction, or a narrow observation of single variables in the case of induction. Induction can be hard to apply in all aspects, so abduction is a really powerful tool to apply knowledge of biology, chemistry, and biomechanics to come up with the most likely answer. Now, the take-home point here is that there's a moving equilibrium as to how we can use the different methods of reasoning, abduction, induction, and deduction, to come to a conclusion. We need to use a balance of all three at times, and that's the thing that you need to get to grips with.